Still okay, so we're officially on air, which is beautiful. Okay. Gotta get my questions ready for you. Obviously, I'm going to give you a score prediction, like who you think is going to win, Conn Smythe, and everything like that.
Yeah.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah, ready to go.
All right. Oh, Jesus. I just turned my dad's computer on. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. So we are now joined by Kirby Paulson, the former now president of QBSN at Quinnipiac University. Kirby, it's good to talk to you after you're graduating from Quinnipiac. How are you doing?
It's good to speak with you as well, Steve. It's weird. I mean, post-grad life is treating me interestingly, let's say, but I definitely miss all you guys, and you guys killed coverage down in North Carolina for the tournament, so good on you.
Thank you very much. Here we're not here to talk about baseball. We're here to talk about your Boston Bruins, a team that you worked for last year. You're not working for them this year, right?
I have never worked for the Bruins, believe it or not.
Really? I thought you did last year.
Nope.
So you were just always at the Bruins games?
I don't know.
Fair enough. So, Boston, so many people have said it, the city of champions with the Patriots, the Red Sox. I guess you can count the Celtics in that. And now the Bruins, they're in their third Stanley Cup of the decade. What is this championship, or, what would this championship mean to a city that has already had so many of them?
I think we're seeing a very interesting transitional period for Boston sports. And I think a lot of people would disagree with that statement. We have seen complete domination from these teams since the start of the 2000s. All four major Boston sports teams have won a championship. The Bruins broke their last curse, as you might say, of 39 years back in 2011. In 2011, I was an eighth grade kid. I had just graduated from eighth grade, getting ready for high school. So it's kind of fitting now that they have another chance to win here as I've just graduated from college. But I think what's really important here is when you walk around Boston, you can feel the energy when there's a championship game coming up or when there's a big playoff game coming up. I was blessed to be able to experience that during the Red Sox season. You see that with the Patriots as well. But now with the Bruins, Boston is a hockey town, and we're seeing that in the full frontal area here because so many people are excited. You walk around, so many people are donning jerseys, even on days when they don't have games. So I think for the city in general, yes, there's going to be a million people that tell us you've won enough championships, and that's fine. But for this city, sports is everything. So I think that the city continues to embrace that sports community, and this would be a really special event for them.
I was going to say, in those however many championships Boston's had in recent memory, if the Bruins are able to come back from 3-2 down in St. Louis, where would you rank this out of championships? Obviously, depending on if this game goes to overtime and everything like that. So,
I have absolutely no idea on ranking. I mean, off the top of my head, I know the Bruins in 2011 was really special. Red Sox in 2004, Patriots comeback, even the Malcolm Butler interception game. Red Sox after 2013, after the Boston bombings was a big year. I really don't know where this would fit on a ranking. And really, if I had to sit down and go through it, I don't know that I'd be able to do it very, very accurately, and I don't really know that anyone could. So I guess the way that I look at it is, I don't want to say it's just another blip on the radar because it's not. But we try to take advantage of this as people that live around here, taking advantage of that energy and trying to soak that up a little bit, because one day it's true that this might not be there, but for now we're trying to live in the moment.
Yeah, you just said about about being with the Red Sox last year when they won a championship and the atmosphere that was around that team. Tell me, what is the atmosphere like around the stadium, around an organization, and really just around the team that when they know that they're one game away from a championship?
It's infectious. There is a lot of anxiety and a lot of feelings of nervousness too. I think that no matter if you're up 3 games in the series, 3-0, or you're down 3 games in the series, you have to go into it with the same mindset of anything can happen. And I think we know that. And in sports in general, in the playoff season, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I think the atmosphere is a lot of fun to be around. Everyone's having a great time, and you try to just take it in. But there's also that feeling of you kind of have to not doomsday prep, not expect the worst, but know that anything can change at any moment. So, when it's a big moment of the game or something big is going on, go for it, because that's something that you want to be able to remember moving forward, no matter what.
So Game 7 tickets, from what I saw, the cheapest price was $1,200.
That's the cheapest price you saw?
Yes, yeah, that was the
I looked
cheapest.
online this morning; it was 1,800.
So that was like, I think, a couple days ago. So what would it have taken you to drop $1,200 or $1,800 really on a Game 7?
Well, I'll tell you right now, fees included, the cheapest tickets I can see right now is $1,900 if we're rounding $2 up from the $1,898. So, for me to drop that money, I wish I had the money, to be quite honest.
That's true too.
If this were an ideal world, my student loans would be paid off. I'd have a full-time job. I'd be in a good situation where I could do that. I'm not, and that's just the reality of it. But I'm not necessarily brokenhearted over it, and the way that I'm looking at it is a lot of people are going to be in the boat where they're going to want to be together watching the game. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're at the game, in my opinion. This is how I've always thought about sports. You don't have to be at the game. Is it incredible? Absolutely. I'm never going to question that twice. I was at Nathan Horton's 2011 Game 7 against the Canadiens overtime goal. That was one of the greatest moments of my sports moments that I've ever experienced. But in the long run, if you're watching these games with people that matter and you're creating memories that way, they're just as memorable, in my opinion.
So with going now strictly with the Bruins and not the city of Boston, as we've kind of tailored these questions to, for the Bruins specifically, they were able to go into St. Louis. They were able to win without Chara, win with Chara, who is basically a vegetable, and win without Matty Grzelcyk in the lineup. Really, they struggled a little bit defensively, but shorthanded. What does this mean for the Bruins that they were able to go into St. Louis with the cup in the building and basically steal a game and really dominate a game when they were down 2 defensemen?
Well, number one, I think that I completely disagree with the idea that Chara just wasn't able to do anything. I think that number one, his leadership and his presence speak for itself, and that's something that we've learned over the years. And number two, I still think even hurt, he still served as somewhat of a serviceable defender. I mean, when you're dealing with that kind of injury, the fact that you're able to get out there and be that force, even if it's at a minimal level, is important. I really, I applauded him for that. And then, you look at the team in general, and they've played pretty darn well in games like that, where kind of their backs either against the wall, they're playing in those elimination games, whether they're doing the eliminating or elsewhere. And I think, number one, Tuukka Rask has been the key to all of this. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but I think he's your upfront Conn Smythe candidate if they end up winning the cup. Right up behind him are guys like Torrey Krug, and even Charlie Coyle has played really well. I think that's kind of gone under the radar. I remember saying to Dan Ball a couple of weeks ago, this third line is like a pretty good second line for almost a bunch of the different teams in the league. And that has really stood the test of the playoffs here. And I think that line's been really good. But what we saw was a little bit of resurgence from that first and second line as well. I think we're seeing a lot more energy from them. And you got to be able to score in the power play too, and play through calls. I'm sure we'll end up talking about that later as well, because I know you and you're going to tee something up on that. But I think it's important to realize that going into a Game 7, anything can happen here. But we're also dealing with the fact that the Bruins are coming home and they're coming off a real good commanding win. So it'll be interesting.
I feel like we'd be remiss without talking about Connor Clifton. And really, since Matty Grzelcyk has been out of the lineup, we just talked about it in the last question, Clifton's kind of been, not playing as many minutes. I think he only had 5 or 6 minutes in Game 6. So really, where do you see Connor Clifton's game either going with the Bruins or just in the NHL in general?
I think people's criticism of Connor Clifton is unwarranted for one or two different reasons. Number one, everyone forgets how young he is. Okay. I mean, we're talking about a kid that was in the AHL, less than 2 years ago. Like, this is not this. I don't want to say this happened overnight, but it definitely happened quicker than I thought. I think a lot of people believed it would. And he's proven himself at this level. He's shown that he can come into these big situations, these high pressure situations, and show up when it matters most. Now, he's had a couple of missteps, and I don't know what NHL player hasn't, though, to be quite honest with you. If people are expecting him to go out there and have an incredible performance, even when guys are down, then that's just unrealistic. What every single player on that team right now is trying to do is trying to not only play for their teammates, but try to plug those holes as well. He's doing the absolute best that he can. I think in the long run, there are things that he can work on. But again, that's going to come with time, and that's going to come with experience. Everybody forgets that this was his first NHL season, and that's going to take some time to get that veteran status. So his performance so far with the missteps, in my opinion, has been pretty good, especially with what the Bruins have had to deal with, whether it be Chara going down, Grzelcyk going down. Grzelcyk was a huge loss. In my opinion, Matt Grzelcyk was probably the second or third best defender on the team. So it's tough, but I think that he's definitely played pretty well given the circumstance.
And, people from, I know we've talked about this a couple of times, people from Boston they've been accustomed to winning these championships in recent years. But really, Quinnipiac itself, I mean, they don't have a hockey championship, which is really the main sport. So what would it mean for Connor Clifton to bring the Stanley Cup back to Quinnipiac if the Bruins were to win tomorrow night?
Oh, my goodness. I think it would be amazing for the Quinnipiac community. I think this is a hockey program that continues to prove that it's here to stay as a national contender, and we saw that this year. Even in that tough game against Duluth, I honestly thought that we were going to have to start booking some bus trips up to Buffalo after that game, just because it just felt good. And I remember feeling that way back in 2016 at the Frozen Four in Tampa too. Like at the time, it just felt like a good situation. So I think for the Quinnipiac community, that would be amazing for them. But more importantly, I also hope he takes that cup home. So if he wins it, to his family and his friends and his hometown and the people that have been there supporting him from the get-go. That's what I really like to see, is when those guys are able to take it home and share that moment with them. It's always nice when they're able to bring it back to their universities and share it with the community. But, family and friends will always be there no matter what. And that's definitely something that I'll be looking forward to see, regardless of which team wins.
And kind of piggybacked and kind of segue into my next question is, do you think he brings the cup to Quinnipiac if Boston wins?
You know what? That's talking in hypotheticals, and that's guessing on something that I quite frankly, superstitious wise, don't feel comfortable talking about. So
completely understand.
We're gonna move on from that one.
So obviously, we talked about the officials a couple of minutes ago, but on a letter grade A to F, how would you grade the officials consistency wise during not just the postseason, but during the Stanley Cup Finals?
Oh man, I mean, I think the consistency's been difficult, and if you open up your Twitter feed to the hockey Twitter community, I think they'll tell you that the consistency's been off no matter what. I don't want to give it a letter grade, quite frankly, because I haven't had time to sit down and really look at the difference in everything. That would be a lot of tape to roll back, but I also feel like, regardless of what the officials are calling, and I think Game 7 is going to be officiated very differently than any other game because it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. I think the reality of the situation is whatever you get called against you, yes, it's unfortunate, it's tough, but you still have a chance to come back and fight that adversity. And I think that's really important. And I think the Bruins showed that. Even in that game where everyone was freaking out about the Achari slew foot or trip or whatever the definition of it is, it had taken them a while to score on Binnington. You and I talked about this. He looked really good. But the other thing is, too, like, I was expecting some of those shots to start falling, and they just didn't. And they showed that they were resilient enough to put in an effort to fight back. I thought that was a really important loss for them. I think that was a really important learning lesson for them to lose that game, understand that this stuff is going to happen, and now they kind of have to move on and turn the page. And I think that in the long run, that's going to be a big difference maker.
Okay, so final two questions, the big two questions, score prediction and your Conn Smythe prediction.
Sorry, I lost your score prediction and
Conn Smythe prediction.
Conn Smythe, Tuukka Rask. I don't think there's much of a conversation on that. If the Bruins win, I think you can make an argument that if the Blues won, it'd be Binnington. So I think you've got a serious goaltender. And I love this whole Binnington story because, the name sounded so familiar at the time, and then they started talking about how he was down in Providence, and a lot started making sense. So good for him. I mean, it's been a cool story. In terms of score prediction, I don't think it's going to be a real walk in the park. I think it'll either be like a 5-3 in regulation, fifth goal being an empty net goal for the. I still think the Bruins come out on top in Game 7, so probably either 5-3 in regulation or 4-3 in overtime. I don't think that either team's going to let up at all. For the Bruins, I'm interested to see who plays and who doesn't. I know Chris Wagner's out there skating at practice this very moment in a regular practice jersey. Grizzlick's out there in a non-contact jersey, so it'll be interesting. And then you got to keep Coleman in the lineup for the Bees. So, whether that's pulling Heinen and putting Backus in, I don't know what that looks like, but I guess we'll see, and time will tell.
And, if the St. Louis Blues do win the Stanley Cup and say this game is, 2-1 or 1-0, do you still see Tuukka Rask winning the Conn Smythe?
I mean, if it's 2-1 or 1-0, I think it's a tough argument. And the only reason I say that is because, Binnington has proven that he can do the same thing and keep them off the board when needed. I think the difference is, and I think you'll agree with me here, is that the Bruins have been able to turn on the offensive jets and have had a couple of real good offensive performances. So in the long run, I think Tuukka Rask has been the best player in the playoffs, period. But again, I don't know how that'll all play out in the end. I think depending on how this game goes, we'll have a better idea.
So a huge thanks to Kirby Paulson, and good luck on Wednesday night as the Bruins take on the St. Louis Blues in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Thanks, Kirby, for joining us.
Thanks, brother.
All right.